So after I finish my lecture, you shall be able to know about the changes that occur in an organization, explore how these changes affect the organizational climate, and learn how to manage the changes in an organization. Organizational changes don't mean that these are the changes that occur suddenly in an organization, but it means the modifications that take place from old to new to bring improvement at the workplace. These modifications create some adjustment problem for its employees until they adapt to these new modifications. The process of modification or adaptation, the changes that occur in an organization and the way the organization copes with it is called change management. The whole process of change and change management is studied under the segment division of changes that occur due to environmental factors, that is globalization, diversity and ethics and organization context. Design and culture also come under it. This whole lecture that I am going to take will briefly explain the factors that bring changes in an organization and how these changes can be managed. Economic globalization is the increasing economic interdependence of national economies across the world through a rapid increase in cross-border movement of goods, services, technology and capital. Whereas the globalization of business is centered around the diminution of international trade regulations as well as tariffs, taxes and other impediments that suppress global trade, economic globalization is the process of increasing economic integration between countries, leading to the emergence of a global marketplace, or let's say a single world market. Depending on the paradigm, economic globalization can be viewed as either a positive or a negative phenomenon. Economic globalization comprises the globalization of production, markets, competition, technology and corporations and industries. Current globalization trends can be largely accounted for by developed economies integrating with the less developed economies by means of foreign direct investment, the reduction of trade barriers as well as other economic reforms, and in many cases immigration. Change management is an approach to transitioning individuals, teams and organizations to a desired future state. In a project management context, change management may refer to a project management process wherein changes to the scope of a project are formally introduced and approved. Let's go to the environmental context. We begin with globalization. Like I said, the concept of globalization emerged from the intersection of four interrelated sets of communities of practice: academics, journalists, publishers, editors, and librarians. In 2000, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, identified four basic aspects of globalization: trade and transactions, capital and investment movements, migration and movement of people, and the dissemination of knowledge. Further, environmental challenges such as global warming, cross-boundary water and air pollution, and overfishing of the oceans are linked with globalization. Globalizing processes affect and are affected by business and work organization, economies, socio-cultural resources, and the natural environment. With improvements in transportation and communication, international business grew rapidly after the beginning of the 20th century. International business includes all commercial transactions, whether they are private sales, investments, logistics, and transportation, that take place between two or more regions, or we can say two or more countries and nations beyond their political boundaries. Such international diversification is tied with firm performance and innovation, positively in the case of the former and often negatively in the case of the latter. Usually, private companies undertake such transactions for profit. These business transactions involve economic resources such as the capital, natural and human resources used for international production of physical goods and services such as finance, banking, insurance, construction and other productive activities. International business arrangements have led to the formation of multinational enterprises, like we call them multinational companies, MNCs, that have a worldwide approach to markets and production, or one which has operations in more than one country. A multinational enterprise, like I said, can also be called a MNC or a multinational corporation, or it can be called transactional company, TNC. Well-known MNCs include fast food companies such as McDonald's and Yum Brands, vehicle manufacturers such as General Motors, Ford Motor Company and Toyota, consumer electronic companies such as Samsung, LG, Sony, energy companies such as ExxonMobil, Shell and BP. Most of the largest corporations operate in multiple national markets. Moving on to change, most of the scholars and practicing managers would agree that the major environmental context impacting organizational behavior is globalization. The advances made in air travel and technology have made world truly a smaller place, which has led to a borderless flat world as described by Thomas Friedman. Phenomena such as social media and mobile adaptability have revolutionized business, and the effect of this is an ever increasing need for change and therefore the need for change management. The growth in technology also has a secondary effect of increasing the availability and therefore accountability of knowledge. Easily accessible information has resulted in unprecedented scrutiny from stockholders and the media, and the pressure on management has increased. The global workforce or international labor reflects a new international division of labor that has been emerging since the late 1970s in the wake of other forces of globalization. The global economic factors driving the rise of multinational corporations, namely the cross-border movement of goods, services, technology and capital, are changing the ways of thinking about labor and the structure of today's workforce. With roots in the social processes surrounding the shift to standardization and industrialization, post-industrial society in the Western world has been accompanied by industrialization in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia. As industrialization takes hold worldwide and more cultures move away from the traditional practices in respect of work and labor, the ways in which employers think about and utilize the labor are changing. Moving on to management. Development of global mindset is needed for effective dealing with the complex cultural context facing the study and application of organizational behavior. Let's talk about diversity. The business case of diversity stems from the progression of the models of diversity within the workplace since 1960s. The original model for diversity was situated around affirmative action, drawing strength from the law and a need to comply with equal opportunity employment objectives. This compliance-based model gave rise to the idea that tokenism was the reason an individual was hired into a company when they differed from the dominant group. The social justice model evolved next and extended the idea that individuals outside the dominant group should be given opportunities within the workplace, not because it was the law, but also because it was the right thing to do. This model still revolved around the idea of tokenism, but it has also brought in the notion of hiring based on good fit. In the deficit model, organizations that do not have a strong diversity inclusion culture will invite lower productivity, higher absenteeism, and higher turnover that will result in higher costs to the company. Moving on to change. In the past, diversity was treated primarily as a legal issue, but now organizations are beginning to realize that diversity is not something to deal with, but instead a reality to build on and make a stronger, more competitive enterprise. Diversity must be recognized and nurtured as the organization's greatest asset, and ability to attract and work with diverse natured talent must be seen as a critical competitive advantage. Moving on to management. Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, has identified outcomes such as following for effective diversity management. Number 1, creating a work environment or culture that allows everyone to contribute all that they can to the organization. Number 2, leveraging differences and similarities in the workforce for the strategic advantage of the organization. Number 3, enhancing the ability of people from different backgrounds to work effectively together. Moving on to discussing the major reasons for diversity. If we go to the organizational context, before we directly jump upon the segments of organizational context, that is the design and culture, let's give a brief look to organizational theory foundation for design and culture. The major development in organizational theory was to view organization as a system made up of interacting parts. The contingency theory suggests that organization change through internal transformation and adaptation, whereas ecological approach says that it is more a process of the survival of the fittest. There is a process of organization selection and replacement. The organizations were also portrayed as learning organizations at the turn of the last century by Frederick W. Taylor's Learnings on Scientific Management, which was said to be transferable to workers to make organizations more efficient. Chris Argyris and his colleagues made a clear distinguish between the single loop and the double loop. Let's talk about what the single loop is. Single loop learning involves improving organizations' capacity to achieve known objectives. It is associated with routine and behavior learning. Under a single loop, the organization is learning without significant changes in its basic assumption. Moving on to the double loop. The double loop learning re-evaluates the nature of the organization's objectives and the values and beliefs surrounding them. This type of learning involves changing the organization's culture. Importantly, it consists of the organization's learning how to learn. Learning organizations have some set of characteristics defining them more clearly, which are briefly I am going to present now. Number 1 is presence of tension. There is a gap between the vision and the reality. There is questioning, inquiry. There is challenging of status quo, and there is critical reflection. Number 2 is systems thinking, which involves a shared vision, holistic thinking and openness. Number 3 is that there is a culture which is facilitating change. There is an invitation to suggestions, there is teamwork, there is empowerment, and there is empathy, which is very important. Moving on to organizational designs. The need for flexibility, adaptability to change, creativity, innovation and knowledge, as well as the ability to overcome environmental uncertainty are among the biggest challenges facing growing number of organizations. To overcome these changes and challenges, organizational designs were made. In my lecture, we will briefly discuss 4 modern organizational designs. Number 1 is the horizontal design. Number 2 is the contemporary design, which would involve the hollow design and the modular design. Number 3 is the network design. Number 4 is the virtual organization, and I will also on boundaryless organizations. Let's start with the first one, the horizontal design. This design is governed on the basis of principles mentioned to make this design more effective. Number 1, make teams and not individuals. The cornerstone of organizational design and performance is this. Number 2, decrease hierarchy by eliminating non-value added work and by giving team members the authority to make decisions directly related to their activities within the process flow. Number 3, emphasize multiple competencies and train people to handle issues and work in cross-functional areas. Number 4 is measures for end of process performance objectives as well as customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction and financial contribution. Number 5 is built upon a corporate culture of openness, cooperation, collaboration, a culture that focuses on continuous performance improvement and values employees' empowerment, responsibility and well-being. Moving on to the contemporary designs. This design is further classified into 2 categories. One is the hollow design and the other is the modular design. This whole concept of design is based upon outsourcing of the whole process. The hollow design, in this design, the whole process of productivity of services and products is taken offshore. In the modular design, instead of taking the whole process offshore like in the hollow design, the modular design consists of decomposable product chunks provided by internal and external subcontractors. Moving on to the network design. Another modern structure is network. While business giants' risk becomes too clumsy to proact and react efficiently, the new network organizations contract out any business function that can be done better or more cheaply. In essence, managers in the network structure spend most of their time coordinating and controlling external relations such as the electronic means. H&M is outsourcing its clothing to a network of 700 odd suppliers, more than 2/3 of which are based in low-cost Asian countries. Not owning any factories, H&M can be more flexible than any other retailers in lowering its costs, which aligns with its low-cost strategy. The potential management opportunities offered by recent advances in complex network theories have been demonstrated, including the applications to product design and development and innovation problems in markets and industries. Talking about virtual organizations here, the term virtual organization has emerged not so much because it describes something distinct from network organizations, but because the term itself represents the new environment and partnership. Virtual organizations can be defined as being closely coupled upstream with its suppliers and downstream with its customers, such as where one begins and the other one ends means little to those who manage the business processes within the entire organization. A special form of organization is boundaryless organization, which is also virtual. Virtual organizations are not physically existing as such, but enabled by software to exist. The virtual organization exists within a network of alliances using the internet. This means while the core of the organizations can be small, the company can still operate globally, be a market leader in its niche. According to Anderson, because of the unlimited shell space of the web, the cost of reaching niche goods is falling dramatically. Although none sells in huge numbers, there are so many niche products such as collectively that they make significant profits. That is what we call something which is highly innovative. Amazon.com is so successful. We can quote it here as an example. Here are some of the key attributes of virtual organizations I am going to discuss with you. Number one key attribute of a virtual organization is technology. Informational networks will help far-flung companies and entrepreneurs link up and work together from start to finish. Number two is opportunism partnership. Here in opportunism, partnership will be less permanent, less formal and more opportunistic. Companies will band together to meet all specific market opportunities and more often than not fall apart once the need evaporates. There are no borders. More cooperation among competitors, suppliers and customers makes it harder to determine where one company ends and the other one begins. There is also this factor of trust. These relationships make companies far more reliant on each other and require far more trust than ever before. Excellence is very important because each partner brings in the core competence to the effort. It may be possible to create a best of everything organization. Every function and process could be world class, something that no single company on its own can achieve. When we are talking about boundaryless organizations, a boundaryless organization is one in which its design is not defined by, or let's say limited to, the horizontal, vertical or external boundaries imposed by predefined structure. In other words, it is an unstructured design. The structure is much more flexible because there are no boundaries to deal with, such as a chain of command, departmentalization and organizational hierarchy. Well, instead of having departments, companies have used the team approach. In order to eliminate boundaries, managers may use virtual, modular or network organizational structure. In a virtual organization, work is outsourced whenever they feel it is necessary. There are small number of permanent employees. However, specialists are hired when a situation arises. Example of this would be subcontractors or freelancers. A modular organization is one in which manufacturing is the business. This type of organization has work done outside of the company from different suppliers. Each supplier produces a specific piece of the final product. When all the pieces are done, the organization then assembles the final product. A network organization is one in which companies outsource their major business functions in order to focus more on what they are in business to do. Moving on to identifying change and change management. In any organizational setting, before we manage any change, the most important is to identify the changes happening at workplace. Once the change is identified, it becomes easy to manage it. Few points I would talk about now which will help in identifying the changes that are occurring at a workplace and how to manage these changes in the workplace. Number one, recognizing the changes in the broader business environment. Number two, developing the necessary adjustments for their company's needs. Number 3 point is training their employees on appropriate changes. 4 is winning the support of employees with the persuasiveness of the appropriate adjustments. As a multidisciplinary practice that has evolved as a result of scholarly research, organizational change management should begin with a systematic diagnosis of the current situation in order to determine both the need for change and the capability to change. The objectives, content and process of change should all be specified as part of a change management plan. Change management processes should include creative marketing to enable communication between changing audiences, as well as deep social understanding about leadership's style and group dynamics. As a visible track on transformation projects, organizational change management aligns groups' expectations, communicates, integrates teams, and manages people training. It makes significant use of performance metrics such as financial results, operational efficiency, leadership commitment, communication effectiveness, and the perceived need for change to design appropriate strategies in order to avoid change failures or resolve troubled change projects. Successful change management is more likely to occur if the following points are included. Number 1, benefits management and realization to define measurable stakeholders' aims to create a business case for their achievement, which of course should be continuously updated, and monitor assumptions, risks, dependencies, costs, return on investments, benefits, and cultural issues affecting the progress of the associated work. The second point is effective communication that informs various stakeholders of the reason for the change. Why? The benefits of successful implementation. The stakeholders want to know what is in it for us, as well as the details of the change, when, where, who all are involved, what will be the costs involved, etc. Number 3 is devise an effective education training and or skills updating scheme for the organization. The fourth point is counter resistance from the employees of companies and align them to overall strategic development or direction of the organization. The fifth point is provide personal counseling if required to alleviate any change related fears. The sixth point is monitoring of the implementation and fine tuning as required. Let's summarize the lecture that I have given you today. Number 1, organizational changes don't mean changes which occur suddenly, but it means the modification that takes place from old to new to bring improvement at the workplace. Number 2, the process of adaptation to these modifications and changes is called change management. Number 3, the development of global mindset is needed for effectively dealing with the complex cultural context facing the study and application of organizational behavior. Number 4, diversity must be recognized and nurtured as the organization's greatest asset. An ability to attract and work with diverse natured talent must be seen as a critical competitive advantage. Next, we had talked about the single loop. Single loop learning involves improving the organization's capacity to achieve the known objectives. It is associated with routine and behavior learning. Under single loop, the organization is learning without significant changes in its basic assumption. The double loop. The double loop learning re-evaluates the nature of the organization's objectives and the values and beliefs surrounding them. This type of learning involves changing the organization's culture. Importantly, it consists of the organization's learning how to learn. Then we had talked about the need for flexibility, adaptability to change, creativity, innovation and knowledge, as well as the ability to overcome environmental uncertainty. These are among the biggest challenges facing the growing number of organizations today. To overcome these changes and challenges, organizational designs were made. In this module, we have briefly discussed 4 organizational designs. We have talked about the horizontal design, the contemporary design, which involves the hollow and the modular design. We have talked about network designs, and we have talked about virtual organization.